When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Over the past few months, businesses, especially small businesses, have faced a lot of proverbial lemons, but the power of pivoting has become clearer than ever. We're here to share stories from PayPal merchants who have pivoted their businesses during COVID-19, innovating their way through uncertain and strenuous times. Welcome to the Adaptables. Welcome back, everyone. As you know, I'm your host, Sarah Davidson, and I'm delighted to have Lucas Stone here with us today from Herbivore Florals. You might have heard of chef extraordinaire Curtis Stone. Well, Lucas is his equally successful brother, building Herbivore Florals into a booming floral design business in Melbourne for the past 20 years. Lucas owns and runs the business, which boasts contracts with a handful of major airlines, as well as contracts with Victoria Racing Club and Moonee Valley. But with the outbreak of COVID-19, these airline contracts dried up, along with all of Lucas's work in events and weddings. And to stay afloat, he developed a new suite of products to cater for people stuck at home seeking comfort items, showing he truly is one of the adaptables. I'll let Lucas share the details himself. Lucas, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be here. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Beautiful day, so I can't complain.
I think we've done a pivot even in recording, pivoting your car into a studio. It's a wonderful podcast studio.
We have. Hopefully, it's not too echoey for you.
No, it's wonderful. So, before we get started, we have been kicking off every episode with a little icebreaker. And because business is just such a roller coaster and things are always changing, I like to ask everyone what their biggest assumption was that they had back at the beginning about what going into business would be like, and then how it got busted as soon as you started.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it'll be a pretty common answer among those that have gone into their own business. I think deep down, I feel like everybody wants to work for themselves, right, in one way or another. And I was certainly no different to that. But working for yourself, my grandfather actually had a saying that working for yourself just means you get to work unlimited overtime. So that's how it's turned out for sure. You tend to work your butt off, and that's how it has to be to get the rewards. So I think just the hours that you put into it in your own business come as a little bit of a shock early on, but then you get used to it.
Yeah, and then the perks start to flow in and you realize that it's all, you win some, you lose some, but I love that saying about unlimited overtime. It's so true.
It is, yeah, it really is. He was a wise old man.
Oh, wow. So tell us the story of how you started in business. Take us back to that very beginning, wide-eyed Lucas thinking there was going to be no unlimited overtime and it was all going to be rosy. you
I know,
know,
I know.
you've been in business for 20 years now. So take us back to those early days. What were the beginnings like? Where did your initial interest in florals stem from? Pun intended.
Yes, yes. It wasn't sort of a lifelong dream of mine to own a floral business. I think I was 25 and putting myself through uni as an accountant, as a mature age student. But it was a family business. So mum had had the business for about 7 or 8 years and run it really well. She'd sort of bought it off her old bosses. So I sort of knew the business really well. And then she decided that it was time for her to retire and move to greener pastures. So the opportunity sort of presented itself. And I don't know that I was completely ready, if I'm being completely honest. 25 is fairly young to sort of dive into something like that. But look, the opportunity was there. I had a sound finance background, I think, and I'd spent a lot of time working in the shop over the years, being the family business. So yeah, I jumped at it, and the rest is history. I've been doing it ever since, along with a few other things. So yeah, it's been terrific. I've loved every minute of it.
Oh, that's so amazing. It's funny how even right back from your first sort of jump, you were already an adaptable, moving from a career path that was very, very different and straight into taking over a whole business that you never thought would be yours so early.
Yeah, yeah, and look, that's how you have to be in business. I don't think you can just be one thing. You have to be adaptable. So it certainly held me in good stead over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said you weren't sure that you were ready, but I think that's part of it, isn't it? That entrepreneurial mindset is to start before you're ready
Yeah,
and then just
yeah,
wing it and course correct as you
yeah.
go.
Most definitely. You can never plan for it all from the beginning and get it all right. You have to have that open mindedness, I think, going into it.
And did you find that because it had been around before and it wasn't a brand new business that as soon as you came in, you wanted to make a lot of changes? Like, did you integrate online retail? Was that something you did? Or, what are some of the structural changes you decided when you got in? Like, I'm going to move this business into the next chapter?
Yeah, look, I mean, back when I took it on, we were still writing invoices by hand and sending them in the post. So
Oh,
a lot's changed, a lot has changed. And I think that was one of the things that I saw an opportunity was to really bring the business into the next century. It was 1999, so the timing was pretty good. And I guess, that the generation that mum was in didn't really have the expertise to do it. So it was sort of nice to come in with some fresh eyes and start to sort of integrate some online learnings into it uh, and move the business forward and really sort of grow it from there.
yeah, I think that is something that a lot of businesses resist when they've been around for a long time. But as the world evolves, it's really something you need to get on board despite the discomfort. And there are amazing merchants now that make that really accessible and an easy transition. Like PayPal, for example. When did you guys come on board as a PayPal merchant in the journey?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the business has sort of evolved from being a little suburban storefront to more into that corporate world as we went along. We've done a lot of work with the airlines and many others, as you said at the start. So our focus had always been those clients and really sort of servicing those. So the online world sort of came on a little bit later in the journey, I guess. And I think we sort of did it because we knew we needed to do it, but it wasn't a focus until quite recently. We actually used to be called Strathmore Flowers, and we've recently rebranded to Herbivore. And look, that was a result of, I guess, the next generation coming through. So some of the girls working for me are in their mid 20s now, and so really in touch with that whole online world, and have really great ideas and are very creative. And so they sort of I've utilized that to really develop our online presence, and so that all sort of took place around August of last year, where we switched brands and pushed hard into the online market, and that's when we brought PayPal on as a merchant provider, I guess. So just to give that added security to payments to our customers, and it's been a real win-win. It's been great.
Yeah, I think it is such an added benefit when you do bring on something that's new for you, but for your customer, they're quite familiar with the brand. There's a lot of trust behind it. It does make that really seamless for you.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it was so recent either. That's amazing.
I know. We sort of, as I said, we were online, but the focus just wasn't there. And I think fortuitously, really, we sort of pushed pretty hard towards the end of last year, and now, of course, all this craziness has happened, and it's been a really good thing for us to have. So we were lucky.
Yeah, it's funny the timing of the universe, how it works out that you were already gearing yourself up for what you didn't know you'd need so much.
I know, right? Yeah, yeah.
And before we do move on to the COVID-19 pressures that have been put on your business and the whole business industry in general, just, those peaks that you do get in business that make the unlimited overtime worth it. Looking back on getting the bigger contracts like the airlines, what have been some of your highlight moments in your growth and favorite creations? Like what's your favorite thing to work on? Is it the corporate jobs? Is it like the huge floral arrangements? Do you have favorite flowers to work with?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think the really satisfying work are those bigger installations that you do, and we've been fortunate enough to work with the airlines so that all of the business lounges out at the airport, we get to go out there twice a week and do all of those and replace them. And then the spring carnival is obviously a really fun thing to be involved in, and
Yeah.
the energy that's created around that is just a really nice part of our job, I guess. And I've got a really good creative team around me that can help sort of curate those big installations that you can sort of stand back at the end of the day and have a real sense of satisfaction. In terms of, I guess, products I really enjoy using, it's such a beautiful business because it's so seasonal. So there's always something different, So you're never just doing the same thing day in, day out. The seasons are changing. And although that's sort of shifted a little bit with the introduction of a lot of international suppliers, I guess. So you can get things a bit more all year round. We really try and stick more to those seasonal lines that are grown here in Victoria. And so you come into October and the peonies are out, and tulips are now, and ranunculus as you're coming into spring. And so all of those seasonal things are what keeps it really interesting for us, I guess.
Yeah, I love peonies. Oh my gosh, I get so excited when the season comes back around.
Right. It's one of those things because it's such a short season, and it's you always want what you can't have, don't you?
Yeah, for sure, which is probably what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, Absolutely.
And I think that seasonal nature does mean that you really look forward each year to things like the racing season and, the holidays, travel season where people are flooding in and out of airports and airlines. And COVID-19 has really put a halt on all of that
Yeah.
without much preparation and without anyone really knowing that it was coming. Businesses have had to temporarily shut down, change their offerings completely to stay afloat. What was that initial sort of close down period like for you after the outbreak? Were there lots of contract cancellations? How did you respond emotionally?
Yeah, look, it was interesting. We've been lucky enough, I guess, that we haven't actually had to close it all. So the business has operated all the way through, which has been amazing. But yeah, like a lot of our work, it all just fell off a cliff. The airport sort of closed down overnight. All of the function and corporate work that we do just ceased, and everyone that was planning their wedding had to put it on hold. Including one of my
Mm.
own, one of the girls that works for me. So
Oh, no.
yeah, yeah. So, all of a sudden, and it happened so fast too. It was sort of like, oh, this thing's here, the COVID-19, it's here and you're hearing about it, but it's more overseas. And then it started to come here, and then everyone gets a little bit nervous. And then all of a sudden, it just all stopped. And so you're sort of standing there thinking, wow, what do we need to do now to really survive? And I think the initial reaction with some of the girls that work for me was, well, we all just need to stay home and be safe. And I completely understand that mentality, and I've got kids, and so your sort of first instinct is always survival, right? But then as you sort of think through it and think about what you can do and still be safe and is, as you say, pivot, which is the most used word in the country at the moment. Find out what you can do and sort of maintain that level of safety and keep the anxiety levels a little lower, but still run your business. Because I think once you close a business down, it's much harder to get it back open again than if you can sort of just keep the ship afloat. And in the beginning, we didn't know that there was JobKeeper and those sort of things coming in either. That was all really up in the air. So you have to be really careful with your finances. But look, for us, we've managed to survive, and fortunately, we sort of had the online presence there, so we've just pushed a lot harder into that space. And it's, out of anything like this, I think you can draw positives, and we've been able to do that and really focus all of our energies into that, and it's worked really well for us so far. It's kept us afloat, and so we know that we'll still be here, and we know that all of our clients will still be there once this thing passes,
Yeah.
and we can get back to it. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but not necessarily a bad one.
Yeah, I think there are definitely, now that we've adjusted a little bit more to the reality and we've sort of accepted what's happening and also adjusted to the fact that at the beginning we're used to uncertainty in business, but not this level of uncertainty of how
Right.
protracted it would be. I think now everyone's had time to emotionally adjust and actually assess the damage as well and see how you could just stay afloat without closing until things lift again. Now is when you actually can start to look at the silver linings because you're not sort of floundering around thinking, am I going to survive till tomorrow? This is where the exciting stuff happens.
Absolutely. And I think you sort of get confidence in your ability to roll with the punches, if you like. We're seeing a spike again in this last couple of weeks in Victoria, and that's sort of putting a bit of fear back into everyone. But, we've been through it once, so we know we can get through it again. And yeah, so I guess that level of confidence is sort of there now, which is great.
Yeah. So before you shifted from that sort of feeling of panic to putting that into action, what were some of the things you actually had to manage to make sure you could get to that stage? Like, what were the financial pressures in terms of rent and overheads and insurance and staffing? And how did you communicate with your staff before you knew what the action plan was going to be? Because I think that's what a lot of businesses are facing now and would love advice on.
Yeah, for sure. And look, it's tricky because, as I said, your staff sort of all come in on day one, and they're a little bit like, why are we still here? We should be home and safe. And look, you've just got to be really open and honest with your team, because they're the backbone of your business. Without them, you're in real trouble. And so I was, and I said, look, if anyone's not comfortable being here, you're welcome to stay home. You're not going to lose your job. And we had one of the girls who had an elderly grandmother staying with her for a period of time, so she needed to stay home, and that's cool. Like,
Mm.
you can't force people to do what they don't want to do, and everyone deals with it differently. And so she did that for a couple of weeks, and now she's back at work, but she's sort of more comfortable with the situation, and there's some more I guess, surety around, how it all works. So that was the first point of call, was making sure that the staff were comfortable and happy to be there, because at the end of the day, if they weren't, then they're the ones that are talking to the customers a lot, and that sort of vibe comes off, I think, if they're not wanting to be there. So we're quite open and honest with that. But yeah, the finances are tricky because I'm lucky enough, I guess, to be my own landlord in the building here. But that's a double whammy, isn't it? Right, when this comes along, we lose revenue in the shop, and also rents. So staying open was a really big thing for me, and wanting to sort of survive it. And so we managed to do that. And I think, you speak to your banks, and communication with all of this is the key. It's speaking to your suppliers and your banks, and making sure they know where you're at, and having good relationships with them. Because if you just shut down, then they automatically think the worst, and then all of a sudden you can't get product, or you can't put your loans on hold, and all that sort of stuff. So I think communication is the biggest part of it.
That's such a good point. I'm a serial avoider of anything conflict related. Like I'm so bad at hard conversations, but someone told me when I first went into business that you won't survive unless you're able to tell people stuff they maybe don't want to know.
Yeah.
But if you have a problem, or if you're not going to be able to meet a deadline, it will be so much better received if you just told them first rather than waiting until it's too late. It's been a really big lesson.
Yeah, it's been a key for us. We had all of our growers and wholesalers. They sort of all went into panic mode as well. They didn't, because when it happened for us too, it's sort of 2 months out from Mother's Day, so they're
Oh,
making
yeah.
decisions on whether to plant crops or not, that'll be ready for Mother's Day. And so some did and some didn't. And we sort of needed to be really aware of what everyone was doing in that space too, because, we decided to push on and try and stay open. So we needed to know that we had solid suppliers in place for that time of year, which, funnily enough, was busier than it's ever been, because everyone was in lockdown and couldn't visit. So they just all sent flowers. It was the craziest weekend I've ever had for Mother's Day. So again, silver linings.
Absolutely. And is that kind of where you started to get the idea of realizing your service was more needed than ever and started to create the wellness packs? Where did that idea come from?
Yeah, for sure. So again, I can't take credit for all of that. My team's really creative, and they came up with a lot of these things, and the wellness packs was one of them. And we're doing fruit hampers and things like that, as you see. And I think my other life is in restaurants with Curtis in the States. So we'd sort of seen a crazy demand over there for home delivery, just because it's obviously much worse over there than it is here. And so, sort of, I guess, feeding off that a little, and just thinking more around, well, what do people need? And if you've got someone that's, if your elderly mother hasn't seen you for 2 months, what do you want to send to them? And that, thinking of it that way a little more. So we sort of came up with a few different products, and they've been really successful, which is great. And everyone loves having fresh flowers in their home when they're stuck at home, and it's a really nice thing to be able to do. So I guess you sort of feel like you're doing a little bit of a community service at the same time, which is nice.
Yeah, you absolutely spreading joy in a way that all of a sudden all the other ways people normally spread joy they can't do. So I think it was a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful pivot that you guys did.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of structurally adapting to, I know you guys were offering delivery for free, which was incredibly generous, and making new products also probably involved seeking out new suppliers. And then I know you had started to adjust to being a bit more online focused, but were there any other changes or tweaks to your e-commerce strategy in light of that shift that you had to make?
Yeah. Look, I think we sort of made the decision to make it as accessible as possible, and as user friendly as possible. And obviously, PayPal helps a lot with that, because it is so simple. And for us in the back end, it's really easy to use too. So that's been a real win. The free delivery, everyone sort of rolled their eyes a bit at that when when I said it, but I think what I noticed was there was no cars on the road, so you're twice as quick, and the staff were here, and obviously with JobKeeper, that sort of enabled us a little flexibility with that. So you sort of take in a hit in one area, but you pick it up in another. And everyone's hurting a little bit at the moment. I always sort of think, because some people have just kept their jobs and they haven't, lost any money, and it's probably a little left of centre to thinking of it. But everyone just took a 20% cut, and that money went into a pool to help those who'd lost their jobs and whatnot. Then you'd all be fine. Now the reality, that's not the case. But the way I sort of thought about it was, we can take a hit for right now, and that'll help people send things to people that they love, and so you sort of feel good about that. And in the long run, if you gain some customers long term, then it's good for business as well. So yeah, that was sort of the reasoning behind that anyway.
Do you know, I think that's actually one of the things I love the most about being in business and being able to be so agile and make your own decisions and not sort of face a lot of bureaucracy every time you need to make a change is you can do that. The business community is able to tweak things and take a cut and sort of unilaterally decide things that are going to be good for the business community as a whole. And I love that everyone has actually been exercising that
Yeah.
for the right reasons in ways like taking a hit now so that everyone can get through it. It's just been wonderful to see.
Yeah, well, it's a long-term game, isn't it? You're not in it for the short term, so you've got to think like that, and you've got to really make sure that you're making decisions that are going to keep you around longer term.
And having made that transition, using that mindset, sort of even from before COVID, into addressing how you can be more accessible and more readily available for your customers, I think there are a lot of other small businesses at the moment that are facing that sudden need to get online when it's something they still find really uncomfortable or foreign or new. What advice would you have for them about embracing digital more, what it's done for you, and how to encourage them that it's not as scary as it sometimes seems?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. It's not as scary as it seems. And for me, probably it was a little scary. My wife, whose birthday it is today, so happy birthday, honey. She's
Ah.
definitely the tech savvy one in our household, and has used PayPal for years to buy everything, and so I've sort of been really aware of it. But if you're not sort of operating in that space a lot, then it can be a little intimidating. But I think nowadays, when you sit down and actually do your homework and your research, it's been made so easy for us. Like the platforms that are in place now, as I said, with the back end of PayPal, like it's just ridiculously easy to use once you sort of get your head in the game. And I think that's all it is. It's really just getting your head in the game, and it's not sort of sitting back thinking, "Oh, it's too hard." You just need to make the effort, and then once you're in it, it's like, "Oh God, what have I been waiting for?" It's way easier than I thought. So that's the advice I think is the way the world's going. You're not going to survive without it. So make the effort, and if you really can't get your head around it, there's plenty of people out there that are there to help you. So
Great advice. So, looking to the future, do you think that some of the things you've learnt during this time, including, the new products and the wellness packs, what do you think you'll bring out of COVID and keep on in the business?
yeah, look, I think those products will stay the course, and look, they might shift a little as we go along, but it's certainly diversified our business, and I think that's why we were able to survive. Like the corporates and weddings, and we still have open communication with our clients, and so they'll come back and they'll be great. But the lesson I've learned is to certainly not neglect the online space because it's certainly what's kept us afloat in the last few months, and we see sort of real opportunities to continue to grow it. And I think if you're continually working on it and making sure it's up to speed and just doing little courses, and there's so many different resources you can use now just to make sure you're on top of it, then long term you're going to be more successful. And when things like this happen, and let's hope there's not another pandemic in our lifetime, one's enough, but things happen, right? Like airlines go out of business, and clients change and customers change, so you've got to be flexible. And it's that old financial advice, isn't it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That I think has helped us survive, so it's definitely a course we'll be sticking with.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things you need in business is contingencies and sort of a plan B. But I also feel like digital almost is that because it is a little bit more protected from the physical environment.
Yeah.
I love that the rebrands also allowed you to transcend your geographical location and take on that more global personality as a business, which is wonderful.
That's right, you've got access to the whole wide world, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's a brilliant thing.
And how do you think this whole pandemic situation has geared your business in terms of preparedness for disruption in the future?
Yeah, look, I think it's just made us think a little more laterally around what we need to have in place, and I guess moving forward, just being ready for things like this, and managing your finances really carefully, and making sure you've got a little behind you for a rainy day. Like it's important because it's really easy in your own business when you make it all your own decisions. And it's great to be able to go and buy a new car and do all of these sort of fun things. And you don't really have anyone to answer to except your wife. But so yeah, you've got to be a little careful, and just manage your risk, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lucas, for sharing your wisdom and insights. This has been incredibly reassuring and uplifting. Where can we find you and Herbivore Florals?
Yes, so you can find us online at herbivore.net.au, and then for all the socials, we are at Herbivore Floral. So nice and simple.
Perfect. Well, if anyone wants to send me a wellness pack, you know where to get it. Yep, great.
I'll keep my eyes on the screen for the order.
Perfect. Make sure you guys tune in every fortnight to join PayPal and myself for more stories like this from the Adaptables.